Hey, I'm ZSH Plays. Welcome back to the Alpine Mountain Zoo, where today we're going to be building the next stage of the most complex area we've ever attempted in this game, the Himalayan Pass, with a habitat for Nilgai. Let's go. We've got a lot to do today. We're going to start with laying the groundwork for the rest of the Himalayan Pass area, with all the terrain and the paths, and then we're going to move on to building a habitat for the Nilgai, and then we're going to start building this massive building you can see the beginnings of here, which is going to sit in the center of the area and provide viewing into the habitats. The reason this is going to be so complex is that there's going to be 4 more habitats in this area. Each one of them is going to have 2 viewing areas. Some of those viewing areas are going to be at ground level outdoors, some of them are going to be at ground level indoors, and some of them are going to be raised viewing galleries. So there's 2 different views into each habitat to give the guests a completely different experience depending on where they're standing. And I want to preserve as much of the terrain here as it goes up the mountain as possible, while also digging out new terrain and raising other terrain. It's going to be pretty crazy, and as we all know, the pathing in this game, when combined with uneven terrain, is an absolute nightmare to get right, and that's what we're going to start with. What we're building here is the first raised viewing gallery. This is going to be part of the big building in the center of the area, and this will allow people to look down into the Nilgai habitat that we're going to build in a minute. And at the back of this building is going to be viewing into a habitat for dhole, another animal that we've never used before. Excited to see those. They're also going to be the animal that's visible from the end of the street that we built in the last episode. And this big temple is then going to carry on with more suspended walkways to give people viewing into the enormous habitat for the Himalayan brown bear, one of the most maligned animals in Planet Zoo. But when you're building a Himalayan section, how cool would it be to actually have Himalayan brown bears in there? We could be the first zoo in the world to really start keeping them and conserving them. The climax of the area is going to be the final building in the area, which will house a habitat for snow leopards. So when we're finished, we're going to have red panda, honey badger, dhole, nilgai, brown bear, and snow leopard in here. And this area is going to be so big and so complex, there's absolutely no way we can build it in our standard way of just building one habitat a week. We need to get everything laid out properly first, so that we don't spend the week building a habitat and then have to delete half of it the next week when we try and build the next one. We need to make sure that everything is going to fit together perfectly. So for the first part of this video, we're going to get all the paths and the terrain laid out, all the different viewing areas, and make sure everything is working perfectly before we move on to probably the simplest habitat in the area, which is the Nilgai habitat, which is going to be on the very edge of a cliff, so the views behind it are going to be spectacular. So that's the plan. Let's talk about what we're doing here. So we've used the transport trick to start getting some smooth terrain in here, placed paths over most of it, and now we're putting in the little viewing spots for the Nilgai habitat. So we want a kind of circular courtyard here, which is going to have a little garden behind it, and then the guests will look from there into the Nilgai habitat. And now we're going to extend the path down here towards where the brown bear is going to live, and then put in the beginnings of the raised walkway. So this big temple building extends all the way from the Nilgai habitat back to the brown bear habitat, and it's going to have a path running through it, which is what we're building here, and then joining on to the path going into the building where you can see the dhole. So as you walk into the building, you'll see the dhole first, then you'll climb this path and see the Nilgai, and then you'll walk on and get a really nice panoramic view down into the brown bear with the lost wilds behind it. That's the brown bear over there, and this is the Nilgai. So let's go and get some terrain in here so that we've got something to build the habitat on. So we're going to extend this terrain just in front of the viewing area out to here and get it roughly to the shape of the white box, because that's how big we want the habitat to be. And then we'll finish off all the pathing in the area. This here is the raised viewing for the brown bear. So we'll get ourselves a perfect circle in there, and then we're going to go down past the habitat so that we've got some ground level viewing as well. And then finally, we'll put paths in for the snow leopard building, and then get some stairs and further paths in to join it all together. So if we take a look at the whole area now, this is where everything is going to go. The stairs form a shortcut from the raised viewing for the brown bear down to the snow leopard, but the whole area will be accessible. And that is the basic plans for the area done. Let's move on and start building the Nilgai habitat. The plan for this habitat is that we're going to have guest viewing, then water, then the Nilgai, and then a cliff. I think that's going to create a really impressive looking habitat. The water level's a bit low here. We need it to be deep enough that they will be swimming rather than walking through it so that we can keep them in. So we're going to put a piece of glass in here at just the right height, and that's going to enable us to get the water level in properly like so. As long as it's deep enough that they have to swim in it, then we don't need to do a lot to keep them in there. We'll just have some rocks at the edge because they are swimming, they're not going to be able to climb up over the rocks to get out, and we can get a completely unobstructed view for the guests. We're going to make a nice simple wooden fence to have at the front of the habitat. I thought we'd make a new one for this because it's going to be pretty visible, and we're going to decorate this with some Himalayan stylings later on as well. Using the painted African wood for these, one of the best wood pieces in the game, I think, because it doesn't have a uniform shape and it's got 3 different colours on it as well, so you can really customise it to exactly how you want it to look. Once we've got one of these, we'll just run this round the front of the viewing area. And because the Nilgai won't be able to get past the edge of the water, we can keep this nice and low so the viewing's really good. So as usual, we'll just take one of these, chop the end off it, and then we can copy this round the whole viewing area, following the curve of the path. And then we'll fill in this little spot here with a load of bamboo. Down to this building here. This is currently hiding a staff room, but we're going to use it as an implied shelter for the Nilgai. And then we're going to bring out the barnyard building kit because I want a dry stone wall to create a little garden and an area for the staff to get into the habitat. We'll recolor it to white to match the rest of the area. And there we go. It's looking really nice already, and we don't even have a habitat in here, but it's such a good view in the background. Next up, we're going to add a retaining wall in at the back. For realism, we'll just use our pile of stacked rocks that we often use for this task. No need to go crazy with detailing on this part. It might be visible from certain parts of the Lost Wilds, but it'll be off in the distance and covered in trees, so we'll keep this pretty basic and then fill any gaps in with terrain paint. Then we can move on to the fence to stop the Nilgai just throwing themselves off the cliff. We're going to use our wood and mesh fence. We'll make it 1.5 meters tall to make sure they can't jump over it, although I'm pretty sure they wouldn't want to jump to their deaths anyway. And then we can start lining the water with rocks. These will do a couple of things for us. First of all, they're going to make the edge of the water look much more attractive. And secondly, on the guest side of this water body, we'll have them higher, so that once they're swimming, the Nilgai won't be able to get the perches to get out of the water here, but they will be able to get into it from the other side if for any reason they fancy a swim. We'll fill it in with some vegetation, and then we'll move on to the trees for the habitat. So we're going to have a dead tree here, we'll have one of our autumnal trees there, and then we'll have a pine here, and then a little Himalayan birch with a really interesting shape. Alright, habitat is starting to come together, but it's looking a little bit bare, and you know what that means. It's time for the buffalo grass. Much better. Right, onto the enrichment items. So the Nilgai use one of the best enrichment items in the game, the mud bath. So we're going to place one of those in here, and then as always we'll raise the terrain so it just looks like a natural little muddy part of the habitat. We'll do some more raising and lowering of the terrain here and there to make things more interesting. We'll add an animal door onto the side of this building so we've got an implied shelter for them. One of the best things about being in sandbox mode for me is the fact you don't have to build a full shelter for every habitat that you make. If you want to, you can just imply it, especially if you're going to have 60, 70 species in a zoo. Building 70 basic off-show shelters can be a little much. Okay, we just got a few more bits of foliage to put in here, some creosote grass, some of the Nitaria bushes, lots of nice generic foliage. We'll put a little support on that enrichment item to make it more realistic. And there we go, the habitat's starting to look really nice. The guests, however, are wondering what the hell this area is, so let's start making this look good. And we'll start with another one of our prayer wheels, put that in there in that hole in the path, run a path directly through it so we can get the texture back in there, and then we'll take some of the guest barriers, put those around the whole thing, and then we'll just sink those underground, and that'll prevent the guests from walking straight through this while still enabling them to pass to the left of it and go into the actual viewing part as well. These can affect the guest navigation negatively sometimes, but I tested these and the guests seem perfectly happy to walk either side of it, so it seems like it's working fine. We'll drop in a couple of our custom trees, and then we'll extend this dry stone wall around this little area, make a kind of garden in there, and then add a few more bits of buffalo grass just to tie the area together. And we can move on to the final detailing. So we're going to add some strings of flowers from this tree in the middle. And then I saw in the temples that I'm basing these on, these Asian-style bells on top of wooden posts. They were kind of a standalone feature, but I thought they'd look really nice embedded into the fence. So we're going to have a couple of these on the fence at the front, and then each fence post at the back will have one of these on it, which just adds a little Himalayan touch to the habitat without being too over the top. I think they instantly elevate this stock fence into something a lot more interesting and something a lot more Himalayan looking. We'll put some of those on the staff gate as well, just to tie everything together. And then we just got 2 more things to do, and the Nilgai is complete. Firstly, we're going to drop some dead leaves into the water here for interest. The autumn leaves are super orange, so we're going to use the tropical leaves instead. I think they're more realistic. then finally, we're going to cover up this awful staff path with some more of the rustic panels. Like we did with the red panda, we'll just rotate these in place down the length of this path, and now it just blends in really nicely with the guest path, but the guests won't be able to walk down it. And that's the habitat complete. Before we move on to start the giant temple in the center of the area, I just want to take a quick trip back to last week's alpine goats, because a couple of you let me know that those fences were not sufficient to keep the goats in, so I've made them higher and added some mesh between the horizontal slats. Hopefully our goats will be a lot safer. Let's move on to the temple. These big placeholder buildings have been in the zoo since episode 3, and it's time to start turning them into the proper buildings. So they are built in a similar style to the first building that we did here, but much bigger and more impressive. So we're going to take one of the wall panels that we created for that first building. At a casual 1,200 pieces each, they are pretty expensive in terms of piece count, but they look so good, I don't mind. There is some camera stutter when you're actually building with these pieces, but aside from that, unless you've got the camera right next to them pointed directly at them, they don't seem to affect the frame rate in the zoo at all. So I think the look is worth the frame sacrifice. So we're going to build this up to match the height of the placeholder that we created. We've got a diagonal wall at this end, which will funnel people round to the indoor dole viewing area. And then once they've finished with the dole, up towards the Nilgai viewing gallery. And then we've got a straight wall at the other end. Well, I say straight, the walls slope in on each side, which is always interesting when you're trying to build with them. But we've got this piece here, which does the work of joining them up for us with a kind of beveled edge that makes it much easier to work with. If you're enjoying this, by the way, don't forget to hit the like button. And speaking of likes, it seems like a lot of you liked the idea of me doing a What I Want to See in Planet Zoo 2 video, so I think I will try and get one of those out at some point. Although with Jurassic World Evolution 3 and Planet Zoo, my plate is pretty full at the moment. I'll see if I can get one out at some point for you, because I have a lot of things that I want to see in the next game. Back to this game, we've got the windows in, they're just copied in from the other building, and now we're going to make the top part of this building, which differs from the original building. So the top of this building is in a kind of browny red color with big circular white designs in it, which looks really cool. So we're going to make those now. We'll just copy this panel up here and rearrange it so it's the right size for what we want to go for. And then once we've got rid of a few extra panels, we can go in and get the color right. I think I go back and change this again before the end of the video. You'll see that in the cinematics it's a little too saturated here. Then we're just going to use this simple white circle to create the painted white circles that the real temple has. There's 3 of these, so we'll position one at the end of this piece, and then we can just copy this piece across to the other side, and just by moving them slightly we'll get 3 circles at the same distance from each other. It looks nice and symmetrical. You may have noticed in the intro that we have a new zoo baby this week. The Przewalski's horses have had their first foal. He's a little stallion, so he will be leaving the zoo as soon as he grows up, so I'm not going to ask you guys to name this one because he's not going to be around for very long, not in this zoo anyway. We're almost finished with this part of the building now. Just going to add some wood to it so we get a definite line between the red and the white. We'll add some more wood above the red part of the building because that's what I'm seeing on the temple this is all based on, and then we'll move on to the roof. We'll be using the same corrugated roof that we used for the building at the front, but this one has a different shape, so not only do we need to follow the diagonal shape of this part of the building at the back here, but this roof will then carry on. It's not a double pitched roof like the first one. It just keeps extending upwards the further back it goes. Now, when we put the 2 roof pieces together, because they're grid pieces, we're going to get this area where they overlap each other, which looks really weird. So we're going to use individual corrugated panels to mitigate that. And then we'll patch it up with some other panels. Doesn't matter if it looks slightly janky, that's what these roofs look like in real life. They're always covered in various patches where they've broken and been repaired. And with that done, we can just copy it behind itself to extend it up to the next level of roof. Finally, we're going to use the same bamboo pieces, coloured yellow, that we used on the first building to join the walls onto the roof. And that is as far as we're going to take this temple today. It's time to get our new animals into their habitat and check out what the area looks like. It's so good to see that placeholder finally starting to turn into a real building. I think it looks really good behind the honey badger's house here. Let's check out the Nilgai. I've got to be honest, I think the Nilgai is the only animal that Frontier have added into Planet Zoo where I didn't know what they were until they added them. But they are really impressive. They've got such an interesting colour as well, and I like how different the females are to the male. It's not the most complex habitat, but I think it sits really nicely in this little area here with the garden next to it and the view across the forest to the mountains behind it. Here's the big male getting some food from his enrichment feeder. Let's take a look at the whole habitat. Here it is from behind that dry stone wall there, and that's the next stage of the Himalayan Pass complete. Here's where we started today. Lots of work done. Here's where we are now. Thank you so much for watching as always. Thank you especially to those of you who've joined the Explorers Club. Hit the join button on the channel if you want to see your name up here, and I'll see you again next week for some more Planet Zoo.